And so, dear friends, here we have the evening session that was postponed from a couple of weeks ago. And the topic is an introduction to the new world order of Baha'u'llah. And Hooshmand, dear Dr. Hooshmand Badee, is going to take us through this session this evening. And I know that there are various slides that we'll be helping to read out, Hooshmand. So I'm all very excited to listen into the session. Okay.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much once again. Well, for this topic, friends, one of the significant notions that is stated in the Baha'i writings is this concept of a new world order. And the Baha'i writings indicates that the remedy to social and political and economic crisis consists of the removal of the old order and reconstruction of the new world order. Through his new world order, Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, left plans for the unification of the human race and establishing world peace. Now, please note that this introductory presentation does not justify the totality of the concept of the new world order stated in the Baha'i writings. And if anyone wants to know and study the new world order of Baha'u'llah in more detail, should look at the primary writings of the central figures of the Baha'i faith. But let me begin by saying that this new order will be the fulfillment of prophecies of the world's religions in the past. For example, in it, Jews will find the age of righteousness and peace. The Christians will see the kingdom of God upon earth. And the Muslims will know it as the time when people will meet with God. It is for this reason that the Adamic cycle is known as the age of prophecies, and the Baha'i cycle is known as the age of fulfillment of those prophecies. Related to this subject, these two statements from the writings of Baha'u'llah are very helpful. He said, the world's equilibrium had been upset through the vibrating influence of this most great, this new world order. Mankind's ordered life had been revolutionized through the agency of this unique, this wondrous system, the like of which mortal eyes have never witnessed. And in another statement, he said, soon will the present day order be rolled up and a new one spread out in its stead. Now, Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the Baha'i faith, explained that the spiritual forces released into the world through the revelation of Baha'u'llah have set into motion two simultaneous processes. One is the destruction of the old world order, and the other one is the birth of the new world order. These processes interact upon each other and affect all of humanity. And he said, such simultaneous processes of rise and of fall, of integration and of disintegration, of order and chaos, with their continuous and reciprocal reaction on each other, are both aspects of a greater plan, one and indivisible, whose source is God, whose author is Baha'u'llah, the theater of whose operations is the entire planet, and whose ultimate objectives are the unity of the human race and the peace of all mankind. And further, Shoghi Effendi states, and may I request you to read this, Janet, please?
Yes. A twofold process, however, can be distinguished, each tending in its own way and with an accelerated momentum to bring to a climax the forces that are transforming the face of our planet. The first is essentially an integrating process, while the second is fundamentally disruptive. The former, as it steadily evolves, unfolds a system which may well serve as a pattern for that world polity towards which a strangely disordered world is continually advancing. While the latter, as its disintegrating influence deepens, tends to tear down with increasing violence the antiquated barriers that seek to block humanity's progress towards its destined goal. The constructive process stands associated with the nascent faith of Baha'u'llah and is the harbinger of the new world order that faith must ere long establish. The destructive forces that characterize the other should be identified with a civilization that has refused to answer to the expectation of a new age and is consequently falling into chaos and decline.
Well, thank you very much, Janet. And let me read this slide. And with these words, Shoghi Effendi defines the new world order. He said, this new world order, whose promise is enshrined in the revelation of Baha'u'llah, whose fundamental principles have been enunciated in the writings of the center of his covenant, who is Abdul Baha here, involves no less than the complete unification of the entire human race. This unification should conform to such principles as would directly harmonize with the spirit that animates and the laws that govern the operation of it. The institutions that already constitute the structural basis of the administrative order of his faith. Now, let's continue this discussion with the administrative institution, which is a part of this new world order of Baha'u'llah. This chart, and I have to thank Andrew here that made this chart for me. This chart is about the administrative order with two arms. One arm is the appointed institution on the left, and the other arm is the elected institutions on the right. And the administrative order is a part of the new world order of Baha'u'llah. Started with the Bab and Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha and Shoghi Effendi. They are the central figures of the Baha'i faith. I will talk about these two arms of the Baha'i administrative system in a moment. But let's see what are the ages and cycles associated with the world order. In the writings of Abdul Baha and Shoghi Effendi, the history of the Baha'i faith has been divided into a number of ages and cycles. Now, the Adamic cycle, or cycle of prophecy, lasted approximately about 6,000 years. And that includes Adam and Noah and Krishna at the same period, Abraham, Moses and Zoroaster at the same period, Jesus and Buddha almost at the same period, then Muhammad, and also other unknown and unspecified prophets that, for example, in Holy Quran, it is stated that there are about 124,000 prophets mentioned in Quran. Now, Baha'i cycle or cycle of fulfillment lasts 500,000 years. Baha'u'llah is a universal manifestation for this universal cycle. The Bab is seen as being at the interface between the Adamic cycle and the Baha'i cycle. Shoghi Effendi has divided the dispensation of Baha'u'llah into 3 ages. The heroic age began with the declaration of the Bab in 1844, and that includes the ministry of the Bab, that is 1844 up to 1853, that's about 9 years, and during this period, 2 countries opened to the faith. Then we have ministry of Baha'u'llah, 1853 to 92, that's 39 years, and 13 countries open to the faith. And then we have ministry of Abdul-Baha, 1892 to 1921, that is 29 years, and 35 countries open to the faith during this period. Now, if we add these 3 periods, that is equal to 77 years, and that is the age of Abdul-Baha, because Abdul-Baha was born on the same time as the Bab and declared his mission. The second age is the formative or transitional age. The passing of Abdul-Baha brought on closing of the heroic age, and his will and testament opened the formative age. In his writings, Shoghi Effendi talks about various stages in the evolution of the process of the spread of the Baha'i faith and establishment of its administrative institutions throughout the world, set in motion by Abdul-Baha's Tablet of Divine Plan. Formative age is divided into a number of epochs. As we see here, the first epoch started 1921 up to 1944 or 46, and that covers the period during which the Baha'i administrative order was being set by Shoghi Effendi. Second epoch, 46 to 63, 1946 to 63, which lasted until 1963, was marked by the global spread of the Baha'i faith. The third epoch, from 1963 to 86, and that is emergence of the faith from obscurity and start of social and economic development plans. Fourth epoch, 1986 to 2001, and that is national communities taking on the responsibility for their own development, and that is the beginning of a number of 5-year plans by the Universal House of Justice. Fifth epoch started 2001, and the House of Justice will let the Baha'i community know when it will finish. But the plans for development and construction of especially national and local houses of worship started with this epoch. So these are a number of epochs that we have. And the third age is the golden age. Here, the successive epochs leading to the most great peace. Golden age is the unification of all the peoples and nations of the world. Steps to be taken before the emergence of world order to reach to this golden age. Now, let me talk a little bit about the universal cycle. According to Baha'i scholar Mojan Momen, at the heart of each universal cycle, Abdul-Baha states that there appears a manifestation of God, whom he names the great and universal manifestation. The appearance of this universal manifestation marks the maturity of the universal cycle. All the manifestations that appear after the universal manifestation arise under the shadow, and all the previous manifestations in that cycle were sent in anticipation of his advent. Abdul-Baha asserts that we are now in the universal cycle beginning with Adam, and that Baha'u'llah is the universal manifestation. Thus, the manifestations that have appeared before Baha'u'llah can be considered to have been part of a cycle leading up to Baha'u'llah, a cycle called the Adamic cycle or the cycle of prophecy, which lasted about 6,000 years, and the manifestations that will appear after Baha'u'llah are part of the Baha'i cycle or the cycle of fulfillment. Mojan Moment continues that this Baha'i cycle initiated by Baha'u'llah, during which many further manifestations of God will arise and lasting about 500,000 years, should not be confused with the dispensation of Baha'u'llah, which is expected to be a period of 1,000 years or more, during which the specific teachings given by Baha'u'llah will hold sway until the coming of the next manifestation of God. Hence, each individual manifestation of God has his own individual cycle in which his religion grows, matures, and declines, is part of a larger cycle, either the Adamic cycle or the Baha'i cycle. And these larger cycles are in turn set within the overall universal cycle. Although time is thus in some ways cyclical, the cycles that occur within each universal cycle do not result in return to the initial point. Rather, there is also an element of progression. Each manifestation of God has the function of guiding humanity in its social and spiritual evolution, which in Baha'i term we call that progressive revelation. Now, once again, let us look at this chart, which is about the administrative order as a part of this new world order of Baha'u'llah. As I mentioned earlier, there are two series of institutions or two arms. Here, elected institutions on the right and appointed institution on the left. The next few slides are points that I have chosen randomly and are related mainly to the Baha'i administrative order. And please note that these few points does not really justify the totality of the concept of the new order of Baha'u'llah. Of course, we need much more time to talk about these different institutions. Each line between institutions that we see here have different meanings and different responsibilities. In other words, these lines between institutions must be defined properly. And the best way to is to spend some more time studying Baha'i literatures that are available to us either in book format or online. Two online references. One is www.baha'i.org is a good reference, and also Baha'i Reference Library online are good references if friends want to know more about this relationship or these lines that we see here between different institutions. But for the sake of this presentation, I mention a few points. The New World Order of Baha'u'llah has no similar or parallel. At the present time, the administrative order of the New World Order is in its infancy or beginning stages. The Universal House of Justice is the supreme institution of this administrative order. The Universal House of Justice is designed by Baha'u'llah and reaffirmed by Abdul Baha's will and testament. On the left arm, the hands of the cause of God and counselors and auxiliary board members fall within the definition of the learned. Therefore, they are interrelated and collectively can be called as one institution. Both appointed and elected institutions have separate and complementary functions. There is one common objective for both appointed and elected institutions, and that is the interest of the faith. Hands of the cause of God are appointed by Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha and Shoghi Effendi. They have the duties of propagation and protection. And therefore, as by this definition, no more hands of the cause of God is possible. The hands of the cause of God have no administrative responsibility. They have close collaboration with all levels of administration, both elected and appointed institutions. Now, again, on the left-hand side, a Continental Board of Counselors is appointed by the Universal House of Justice in 1968. They have the duties of propagation and protection of the faith. Auxiliary board members are appointed by Shoghi Effendi in 1954. They have one duty, either propagation or protection. Assistants to the auxiliary board members are appointed by the Universal House of Justice in 1973 and have one duty, either propagation or protection. Those who occupy a position should never exploit their position or regard themselves as being superior to others. True spiritual station of any soul is known to God only. Now, friends, you may be also interested to know how many hands of the cause of God were appointed by Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha, and Shoghi Effendi. And here is the summary of that. 4 hands of the cause of God appointed by Baha'u'llah. 8 outstanding believers referred to after death as hand of the cause by Abdul Baha. Now we come to the main number of hands of the cause, which was appointed by Shoghi Effendi. 10 outstanding believers referred to hands of the cause of God after death. 12 appointed as the first contingent, and that is announced on 24th of December 1951. 7 hands appointed as the second contingent, and that was in 1952. And then 5 appointed individually, and 8 appointed as the third contingent, and that announced in 1957. So total, there are 54 hands of the cause of God. Now, interestingly, 8 hands of the cause of God were women. And this is significant because the hands of the cause of God are the only individuals in the Baha'i faith with spiritual station or spiritual life. Now, Abdul Baha states, the obligations of the hands of the cause of God are to diffuse the divine fragrances, to edify the souls of men, to promote learning, to improve the character of all men, and to be at all times and under all conditions sanctified and detached from earthly things. They must manifest the fear of God by their conduct, their manner, their deeds, and their words. Now, as it was said, there is no way to appoint more hands of the cause of God. But the Universal House of Justice decided to do an extension of their responsibilities. So in June 1973, the Universal House of Justice announced another major institutional development, and that was the formation of the Baha'i World at the Baha'i World Center of the International Teaching Center. This is a step taken to link the institution of boards of counselors even more intimately with that of the hands of the cause of God, and supporting the rapidly growing responsibility of the Universal House of Justice. A few months later, in October 1973, the Universal House of Justice extended the functions of the institution of the Board of Counselors at the grassroots level by authorizing auxiliary board members to appoint assistants to work with local spiritual assemblies, groups, and individuals. And about the Universal House of Justice, Abdul Baha said, and I request Janet once again to read this slide, please.
Abdul Baha states, "And now concerning the House of Justice, which God hath ordained as the source of all good and freed from all error, it must be elected by universal suffrage, that is, by the believers. Its members must be manifestations of the fear of God and daysprings of knowledge and understanding, must be steadfast in God's faith and the well-wishers of all mankind. By this house is meant the universal house of justice, that is, in all countries, a secondary house of justice must be instituted, and these secondary houses of justice must elect the members of the universal one. Unto this body all things must be referred. It enacteth all ordinances and regulations that are not to be found in the explicit holy text. This house of justice enacteth the laws, and the government enforceth them. The legislative body must reinforce the executive must aid and assist the legislative body, so that through the close union and harmony of these two forces, the foundation of fairness and justice may become firm and strong, that all the regions of the world may become even as paradise itself." Abdul Baha.
Thank you very much, Janet. This was from Will and Testament of Abdul Baha. Well, friends, this was a very important statement by Abdul Baha about the relationship of the Universal House of Justice and government, and in particular world government, that is mentioned in the Baha'i writings. Here, my understanding of the relationship between the Universal House of Justice and the world government is that both institutions have a close collaboration and cooperation. The Universal House of Justice will have the legislative power, and the government the executive power. It says the legislative power, the legislative body must reinforce the executive, and the executive power must aid the assistance and assist the legislative body. So that through the close union and harmony of these two forces, the foundation of fairness and justice may become firm and strong. In another statement, this is from the Universal House of Justice, it says that the Universal House of Justice is the apex of Baha'u'llah's world order. It says that there are statements from the Master. Here, Master is Abdul Baha. That's another title of Abdul Baha. There are statements from the Master and the Guardian, who is Shoghi Effendi, indicating that the Universal House of Justice, in addition to being the highest legislative body of the faith, is also the body to which all must turn, and is the apex of the Baha'i administrative order, as well as the supreme organ of the Baha'i Commonwealth. Now, here in this slide, major government systems and the Baha'i institutions are in some way compared. So, for example, democracy, that is about the elected institution, including Universal House of Justice, national spiritual assemblies, and local spiritual assemblies. Some of the features of Baha'i election, including free and secret and without canvassing or campaigning, are a part of the Baha'i election. Then we have aristocracy system. We can mention the example of appointed institutions known as the learned, including hands of the cause of God, counselors, and auxiliary board members. And then we have autocracy system. And here we can mention Abdul Baha and Shawki Effendi with complete power, especially in the interpretation of the writings of Baha'u'llah. And then we have theocracy system, and example includes Hand of the Cause of God with a divine guidance. Now, friends, when we talk about this particular comparison, it is important to know them with the Baha'i features and avoiding problems associated with those governmental systems that we have in the society today. A few words about the Baha'i election would be helpful if I ask another friends to read this part. Maybe Andrew, are you there?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
So Baha'i elections. With electoral and consultative principles, the Baha'i administrative order operates democratically at the local, national, and international levels. The Baha'i election is theoretically and practically different from the electoral processes currently practiced in both private and public sectors. The Baha'i method emphasizes on spiritual qualities and service orientation rather than material gain or power. Baha'is are free to vote for any adult Baha'i who they consider as loyal and faithful. Therefore, there is no nomination or canvassing. Shoghi Effendi states, the strength and progress of the Baha'i community depend upon the election of pure, faithful, and active souls. Canvassing is depreciated. Baha'i elections of the community are sanctified from all traces of canvassing and plotting that characterize the activities of the perfidious.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you. Now, let me end this short presentation by saying an important issue to be borne in mind is that it is as yet too soon, too early for us to envisage the nature and the character of the Baha'i New World Order. Shoghi Effendi has stated that the structure, implications, benefits, and possibilities of the New World Order cannot be understood at present, and that only over time will it become possible for us to discern them. He has stated that only the underlying principles of the New World Order can as yet be described. He has also stated that the world order of Baha'u'llah cannot be compared with any of the detective systems that we see around us today. However, there are good signs developing as well, which is very promising. The Universal House of Justice, in one of their statements, said that the tentative steps towards world order, especially since World War II, give hopeful signs. The increasing tendency of groups of nations to formalize relationships which enable them to cooperate in matters of mutual interest suggests that eventually all nations could overcome these paralyses. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the Caribbean Community and Common Market, the Central American Common Market, the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, the European Communities, the League of Arab States, the Organization of African Unity, the Organization of American States, the South Pacific Forum, all the joint endeavors represented by such organizations prepare the path to world order. So these are very promising that we are witnessing during our own time for the new world order. This is another chart. Once again, thank you, Andrew, for this beautiful chart you did for me. Here, once again, we see the elected institution, appointed institution, and the relationship, the cooperation, collaboration, reciprocation with each other and with Baha'is. Look, for example, at Baha'is on one hand, with local spiritual assemblies on the right and with assistance on the left, and then the relationship of local spiritual assemblies with national spiritual assembly, with collaboration, two-sided, national spiritual assembly with the Universal House of Justice, and then we see International Teaching Center, which is a liaison between the Universal House of Justice and the Continental Board of Counselors. And again, we see the relationship of Continental Board of Counselors and Auxiliary Board member. So this chart shows the collaboration, the responsibility, and also the reciprocation that exists between Baha'is and both institutions appointed and elected. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we cannot do justice during these few minutes to talk about such a big topic, the New World Order of Baha'u'llah. But there are some resources I suggest here if friends want to study more deeply and in detail. The Will and Testament of Abdul Baha is a good source. The World Order of Baha'u'llah by Shoghi Effendi, Baha'i Administration by Shoghi Effendi, the Principles of Baha'i Administration, again by Shoghi Effendi, the Dispensation of Baha'u'llah by Shoghi Effendi, the Advent of Divine Justice. These are all books by Shoghi Effendi. They are good sources for studying this particular topic. Selected letters of the Universal House of Justice are online, easily can be found. Ministry of the Custodian is written by Ruhi Khanum. She is the wife of Shoghi Effendi. And also there is a compilation about the Universal House of Justice, but also the Light of Guidance. This is a beautiful compilation prepared by Helen Hornby, and we can find almost all topics in this particular compilation, the Light of Guidance. Well, thank you very much, friends, and I hope this was helpful. We can have some discussion now. Thank you, Janet.
Okay. Right, thanks very much, Hooshmand. That was very concise, and there's such a lot of information, obviously, and to try to put this over so succinctly, you did that very well.